This is a message for all the people who are gloating, all the leftists who are gloating over the bringing down of Alex Jones from various media platforms, including here on YouTube. And what I think I'd probably remind you of, not that most of you will remember this because you're too young and frankly too fucking stupid and backward, but I'm going to take myself back, and you back indeed, to the days of the old Soviet Union under people like Brezhnev, when he was running the shithole that was the Soviet Union, which of course you worship so much, and all the satellite countries, because they were slaves to communism and the collectivist utopia that you dream of because you're fucking mental. Which is why you probably worship Venezuela as well. But anyway, I can remember myself personally watching in disbelief as these poverty-stricken fucks en masse in Red Square every single May Day, which the Soviets, they loved, they worshipped it, and you have tens of thousands of these dumbass fucking communists marching through Red Square. You'd have the interballistic continental bloody missiles, whatever. They'd be chatting to they'd have the live news feed, talking to two guys they had in a space station, luckiest bastards on earth, Russian bastards, because they could stay the fuck away from the Soviet Union. And you'd have the Politburo, or Central Committee as it was sometimes known, on a plinth, on top of Vladimir Lenin's tomb. Lenin, the guy who coined the very term useful idiots, which to any leftist listening to this, that's exactly what you are, you useless fucking... He in those days, he couldn't have got away with speaking on radio because there was no TV and saying useless fucking pricks, because that's what the useful idiots are. They're just pricks. And that's what most of the mainstream media are. So they used to stand on this, on top of Lenin's tomb, Brezhnev and all of his Politburo, Central Committee, call them what you wish, and they couldn't crack a smile amongst them. Check the video out. So you can find video on YouTube and elsewhere, and they were miserable. They were the most miserable. I can remember in the 70s thinking, these miserable fuckers they've censored themselves, and they were terrified of each other. They were terrified of the very party that when they were youngsters, Brezhnev I think was born in the early 1900s, they were terrified of the very party they'd embraced to overthrow the Tsar, who was a tyrant, it has to be said, but they then embraced a different kind of tyranny. But by then, they realized there was no way out. They'd censored themselves. They were fucked. The Politburo couldn't even disagree with each other. They couldn't argue with each other. And etched into these old men's faces it was always, I could see it year in, year out. They were miserable. They were broken, desperate men. There was no way out for them. But in their eyes, above all, when I used to look into their eyes, the word that came to me as a very young man was resignation. They were resigned to their fate. There was no way out. The whole Soviet Union and every fucker in there was enslaved, and they all knew it. And people who spoke out, Solzhenitsyn, other journalists and people and writers, they'd be sent to salt mines in Siberia, or they'd be frankly shot or jailed or put in mental institutions if they got a name in the West. And for all you leftists who may listen to this, you want to know how it fell down, it was because Ronald Reagan in particular upped the ante when it came to Star Wars and the enormous amounts of money that he pumped into defense, and the Soviets in the end couldn't keep up. Thatcher backed him up. Then you had Mikhail Gorbachev came along after Brezhnev died. Lech Walesa, a union leader who went to jail, then became the president of his country, and they broke it. They broke it in the end. But if it hadn't been for those circumstances, they would have, the Soviet Union, if they could have, they would have taken over the world. And that's exactly what the globalists of today, using communist techniques developed by the Frankfurt School based on gender, race and sexuality, they're trying to atomize society, and they're doing a very good job of it indeed. This is super rich capitalists using communist tactics to atomize and destroy and fragment society, and indeed humanity as a whole. And the question is, who is actually backing the mainstream media and these politicians right throughout the Western world and beyond? In South America, in African countries, in India, these politicians are not being elected, they are being selected by the globalists. The question is, who's backing them? But I would particularly say to the communists and the loonies who describe themselves as progressive. And that's just another word. It's yet another word. It's like political correctness. You think of the phrase, and it's a two-word phrase, correct. You don't want to defy the word correct because it has positive connotations. And if you say politically correct, you're trapping yourself every time that you repeat it without denigrating it by pointing out that there's nothing correct about it, and the politics are those of the feminist Marxist madhouse used by the globalists. And the word progressive is hijacked by the extreme left-wingers who control the vast majority of the mainstream media. They never put the word progressive in inverted commas, saying, hey, that's what these particular people, these people involved in this kind of politics, describe themselves as. This is correct. Progressive is a word which, generally speaking, has positive connotations. And the conservative people among society, shame on them, for decades have allowed these motherfuckers to get away with this for decades and decades unchallenged, because they so successfully use, and I don't care how many tangents I'm going off on here, this is so important for those of you who don't think of it this way. They have so successfully used the Marxist Frankfurt School tactic of race, gender, sexuality, race, gender, sexuality. They've added all along. Then they used to use anti-Semitism. Now you have Islamophobia, climate change denial, transphobic, this phobic, that phobic. Then in the end, they get to the point where you're so fucked up because you didn't stand up for yourself out of cowardice and you were terrified of being called above all racist. You then end up being called ultimately a fascist and a Nazi. When are you going to stand up? The left go out on it. I know that, I'm pretty much preaching to the converted, and yeah, of course, we stand up. But when are people going to go out on the march? Because the left go out on the march, they celebrate it, they love it, they celebrate themselves. They will enslave themselves like the Brezhnevs of this world and the Politburo of the past, until they themselves are they have their faces etched with misery, like the fucking fuckwits that they are. They will, I don't give a shit if they enslave themselves, because I would enslave them today the way they'd enslave me. But in enslaving themselves, they bring all the rest of us down with them in their hatred of democracy, free speech, free debate, free ideas. They will just take away everyone's freedom, including their own. And I don't want to go down to those fucking morons. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much.